I've got 3 super talented builders up here with me, and you're going to hear about generative art, the metaverse, layer 2 blockchains, and DAOs. So we're covering everything. I've got 27 minutes, so let's get cracking. Our panellists are the triple Rs. We've got Rosh, co-founder from Elevate Art, Roy, co-founder and CEO from Pellar Technology, and Rob, the founder of funDAOmental. Rosh, I'd like to kick off with you. So Rosh is a Web3 native who wears a number of hats and is a co-founder of Elevate Art. It's a generative art tool that's breaking down barriers for artists and co-founders to create and launch their generative art collections in a stress-free manner. So Rosh, how is Elevate Art different to the other open source generative art tools that are out there at the moment?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the intro, Tiah. I would say the way that I'd probably answer this is just going through like why we created it in the first place. So start of the year, we sort of helped companies and artists launch their generative NFT collections. And one of the things which we found through that process was that it's incredibly difficult. And then there's lots of things to manage, everything from art storage to metadata and all the rest of it, which is a lot for any artist or company to deal with. And so we did that on a bespoke basis, but what we wanted to do was offer that to more people. And so what we've done is we've decided to take all the learnings that we've taken from those launches and create a developer toolkit for people to be able to create their assets, deploy it, and then sell it. So that makes it easier for developers from any background to be able to introduce themselves into Web3. And we've also built a front end for non-technical people to be able to generate and create their artwork as well.
Fantastic, and I think that's one of the important things for, I guess, the mass adoption of Web3 is catering to people who aren't necessarily technical or developers. I think when a lot of people think about generative art, they think about the PFP projects, like Bored Apes and CryptoPunks. How has generative art evolved since early 2021?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think PFPs will always be a core part of sort of like generative art or image-based layer compilation artwork. I think the space is going to grow and evolve over time, and we've only seen like 1% of what is possible. And I think part of the rationale for giving developers the tools to be able to do some of the basics really easily is so that we can allow them to explore all of the different mediums that they could approach. So whether that be music, whether that be video, whether that be some other type of art medium, we want to be able to give them the opportunity to do that. We sort of see gaming as something that is going to be a really core use case for generative assets in particular. Things like Wolf Game, where you have the creation of on-chain generative assets and then the destruction of those assets and making that a part of like the gameplay itself. We can see that being applied to multiple different industries. And so, I think TBD, but that's exciting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the gaming aspect is something that's going to absolutely boom in terms of generative art. For anyone here that's looking to kick off a generative art project, what's your best pro tip?
I think it's really simple, actually. I think it's just thinking beyond like the art medium itself. It's to be true and authentic to yourself. So whatever it is you want to build, remember that this is just a medium or a technology to allow you to express it. But at the end of the day, you're building a community through this technology. And you want that to be long-lasting and to be true to who you are. So beyond the mint, beyond selling out and all the rest of it, you can carry it through and you are doing, I guess, in large part, we would like to think, your life's work. So that would be my tip.
And also to use Elevate Art. I know you don't want to shield, so I'll do it for you. Thank you, Rosh. So Roy, I'd love to hear a bit about Pellar Technology and what you've been up to. Roy is a serial entrepreneur and has previously founded MMGN, Australia's biggest gaming community, and Market Engine, a global e-commerce platform. Pellar has been building blockchain systems for financial institutions since 2017, processing over 15 million records every day. And Pellar is also the developer behind many high-profile NFT projects like the Australian Open and the Elvis Presley collection. So we're here to talk about building on the blockchain, and you've built an actual blockchain. So can you tell us about Lightlink, what it is, and what differentiates it from other layer 2s out there?
Thanks, Tiah. Firstly, I think layer 2 blockchains are an important part of the ecosystem. Because all the things that we experienced last year in terms of minting and extraordinary gas fees which we paid. So Rosh and I have our moonbirds as our avatar on the thing, right? Like talking about generative art. But we literally paid thousands of dollars in gas fees to get those avatars. And it's something that's unsustainable, super difficult. And when you look at onboarding millions of people into this space, it's something really difficult for people to comprehend and participate in, and therefore you need a scalability solution. So just like Vitalik explained in terms of the roadmap for Ethereum, years in the future, Ethereum as a computation network, probably the most important and the most valuable computation network in the world. It's great for settlement, but it's very difficult from an execution transactional layer. And therefore, without all the crazy exchanges collapsing, if it kept on going the trajectory that we're going, we'd be in a layer 2 environment right now, where you see optimism, Arbitrum, or investing substantially into the space to create scalability for Ethereum. And that's exactly what we're doing, creating a very application-specific layer 2 ecosystem, layer 2 network, called Lightlink. And the very first use case we're trying to address is to provide a capability for metaverses to use blockchain transaction. Because if we look at the evolution of media, the evolution of social networks, we sort of arrive at a more multimedia, more immersive environment. And that's probably more commonly known as the metaverse. In that world, all the transactions from a financial perspective is crypto, and all the things that you interact with will be NFTs, right? And when you have thousands of transactions that's happening at the same time, interacting with each other, creating millions of transactions, layer 1 blockchain, Polygon-matic as an example, BNB Smart Chain, Ethereum would definitely won't cut it. And therefore you need to create scalability. And that's what we do every single day. So we are combining all of our efforts and launching a public chain called Lightlink.
Fantastic. It sounds really exciting. So what's the timeline for Lightlink at the moment?
Yeah, because we've been working on this since 2017, parts of it has been production. From a public chain perspective, testnet is currently online. And I was saying to another colleague earlier, we're taking the top 3,000 most important smart contracts and running in parallel on Lightlink and observing the difference between other networks and ours to make sure it's fully EVM compatible, which is an important part of being layer 2. And we're hoping to launch our mainnet in this year.
Fantastic. So you mentioned the metaverse there. You're also involved in a huge metaverse collaboration project. Can you tell us a little bit about Translucia?
Yeah, Translucia is backed by one of the largest conglomerates in Asia, the CP Group. They own a lot of different retailers, property development companies, and things like that. And I think in the West, we probably see, Microsoft or Meta or, Instagram to a certain capacity occupying a large mind share in that space. But in other parts of the world, there are opportunities, right? Just like Line does really well in Japan, in Asia, so is other forms of media. So there's a huge opportunity for that evolution of media to happen in different environments, in different geographies. And that's the idea behind the Translucia, using Thailand as a home country for the CP Group. And because there are so much different touch points within that ecosystem, they can migrate the users to a metaverse, which the CP Group has invested in. The investment is quite substantial. It's in the matter of hundreds of millions. And Lightlink is the infrastructure layer, the blockchain layer for that metaverse, which is super cool to hear.
Fantastic. That's going to be a really significant project in the space. So I look forward to watching that as it evolves. When we think about the metaverse, particularly non-Web3 natives straight away talk about having to wear these bulky VR headsets, and that's a bit of a barrier to adoption. Where do you see the metaverse, I guess, space moving over the next 3 years, and I guess the issue about headsets and things like that?
I think, headsets are pretty cool. Eventually, if we get there, right? It's a form of experience. So in the early days of internet, we have text. We were just talking about ASCII art just before, right? We have text-based interactions on BBS and things like that. And that evolved into more interactive experiences through, Ajax and through pictures and things like that. And we have Flickr, we have Instagram, and that moved towards, more video-based content like YouTube and TikTok. So we're kind of seeing more and more immersive experiences. So you can have a metaverse without the VR headset, like World Wide Web as an example, like the NFT project, not the web page thing. And that's really, really cool because it's a pixelated character moving around and creating that amazing experience. So I think metaverse can be a multifaceted experience, right? Like could be desktop, could be a mobile phone. It could be AR, if Apple launches something for the mass market and it's a huge hit. It could be VR as well. But eventually we'll get there, not right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those of us that are in the space now have a bit of a responsibility to educate those around us that the metaverse is going to be comprised of a whole host of different technologies and different assets that come along with that. And I guess that's our job, to start educating people who are scared off by the bulky headsets that we've got at the moment. Thanks for that. Rob, let's talk DAOs. Rob is a serial founder, technologist and investor with decades of experience building emerging technology.
Sometimes emergencies.
Businesses and teams. He's been in the crypto space since 2008. You've worked with startups and corporates, so you've seen a lot of operating models, some really good and some really bad. I personally love that DAOs challenge the traditional corporate governance structures, and they're ushering in a new era of ownership and governance. For anyone that isn't aware, can you explain what a DAO is and how it works?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to be a little bit chaotic and say something about the metaverse in response to that first.
Sure.
Which is, the metaverse, on some level, it's a concept called a spatial interface. And so any interface that works with space can be that. It could be an audio interface and so on. So it's much bigger than just like VR or AR and so on. And what's really cool about that is it's deeply intuitive. Everyone has like a hardwired understanding of how to interact in space. Whereas like, say, the web is like an abstract interface. Which you have to learn, and you learn the user interface and so on. So if you imagine a smart contract, it's really complicated to learn. What if you could interact with a smart contract by walking around a room and twiddling some knobs and levers and so on and putting a ticket into a machine? Almost anyone could understand how to do that pretty fast as long as you keep it simple. So I think we're going to see like the emergence of like spatial interfaces as a productivity tool, not just as an immersive or game-like environment. Just thought I'd throw that segue out. So DAOs. So DAOs officially stand for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. I assume that everyone in this room already knows that. And the joke is that if you can find any organization that has meets those three criteria, then let me know. We're still looking. The first, officially was the DAO, which got hacked and caused the Ethereum fork, controversially. But there's been many attempts since then. The thing about DAOs really is that we don't know how to do cooperative coordination yet, and we kind of need to figure it out. And so these people who are trying to do that, despite us not actually knowing what works or not, I tip my hat to them. They are crazy. It's like jumping into the middle of the ocean without a boat and then making the boat while a storm's coming, or some metaphor like that. So, this is a form of cooperative coordination. And it is part of a paradigm shift that has been happening for a long time already, as we move away from monolithic hierarchical coordination structures towards everyone can do anything. So how do we agree on what we do? Now this is also really important because when you have control structures, you have imbalance. Over time, they become less and less fair. The people with power accumulate more power, and so on. And the alternative to that is usually what you might describe as chaos or anarchy, autonomy, which is much more pleasant in the short term, but usually tends to fail. And then you end back up with control. So what DAOs are trying to do really is come up with a third option for coordination that doesn't rely on someone telling other people what to do, but also works. So it could be a really big deal if we figure it out. There's a lot of work to go.
Thank you. Can you talk about funDAOmental and what sparked its creation and what you're aiming to do?
Yeah, so I've been around a long time. I read the Bitcoin white paper the day it was released, thanks to a cypherpunk friend. Just thought Satoshi Nakamoto was a privacy-conscious developer, and thought it was weird when people started trading it for money as well. I was like, but you can just run software on your computer and it spits the Bitcoin out. Why are you paying for it? And before that, I cut my teeth in the 90s. Before the web was really something anyone knew about. One of my first jobs in the mid-90s, I had to call a bunch of restaurants and try and convince them to onboard onto the World Wide Web, the information superhighway, one of the first portals, right? So they're like, the World Wide what? I've been through all of this before in different industries. So I've been privileged to be eventually quite successful after a couple of decades of vigorously failing. And I had the choice to do what I wanted to do. And I set to trying to answer that question. It turns out it's actually quite hard to answer if you have the luxury. And so the question I asked myself was, what will I wish that I had done in 10 years that I could do now? And funDAOmental is the answer. In short, I think that humanity faces a coordination crisis, and that if we don't fix it, we're going to see increasingly destructive conflict emerge. And so what I'm trying to do with funDAOmental is to work on exploring the space of actually effective coordination that doesn't rely on hierarchical control. And so, when people ask me what I do, it usually takes me a while to try and explain it to them in any way that's meaningful. Because how do you explain what you're doing when you don't know what it is? You just know what the goal is, right? Like, we can't know. There is no product that answers this question yet. We need to figure it out. So we're working on that. We're trying to build an open ecosystem of other people who want to work on that and ask that question. Research, experimentation, building products that embody these kinds of principles. And ultimately try to find a stable coordination structure that relies less on people telling other people what to do, and technology tools that encourage and embody that structure. Because anyone that tells you that technology is not political and it's neutral and it's just how we use it is not really thinking about it. It changes the landscape and it changes the environment in which you operate, which changes the culture and the values of the people in it, which changes what is possible. Most people will do what they are incentivized to do by the system that they're in. So it seems crazy to me that we're not asking the question, how do we design coordination environments that produce the outcomes we want, like a more fair power distribution, more reciprocity, more ability to coordinate on some of these existential crises that we face as a species today. How's that?
Thank you. What do you think needs to happen for DAOs to become more commonplace?
For starters, we need to figure out how to make DAOs that work, and we need the help of technology for that. Like the existing governance and coordination structures we have essentially got us from groups of 10 to 15 people to millions of people participating together in coordination, which is a huge accomplishment. No other species on Earth has really accomplished that. Some people might be like, but what about ants? There are lots of ants, they coordinate, but not, you could think of like an entire ant colony as maybe a creature rather than the individual ants, in the same sense that humans are made up of a bunch of different cells. So it's a really hard ramp, right? Like, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know what works, we don't know what's going to be stable, and we're trying to encode these rules into immutable smart contracts. What could go wrong? It's also a usability issue. Like it's just kind of, it's scary, it's intimidating. There's a whole bunch of like magical cult language that we all use to describe it, like pluralistic cooperative coordination structures for starters. And so we need to make it accessible, and we need to include everyone in this conversation instead of focusing just on Web3 and blockchain people. Also there's just only so much we can do to push that, rock up the hill faster. It's going to take time because it involves cultural change. So I think that it's a multi-pronged problem. Every aspect of that improving is what's going to allow it to move forward. Sort of like pull-ups, like they suck, right? They're really hard. You can do like one of them. And you keep practicing and you don't get better. But the reason is because there's some little muscle somewhere in there that's getting in the way, and you have to do pull-ups in a different way to work that muscle out to get better at pull-ups. So in this case, whether it's the user interface, whether it's the accessibility, whether it's the knowledge of how to interact with people, whether it's the comfort factor of not having someone to tell you what to do. In Australia in particular, like we're very corporatized, we're very used to these low-risk environments where we don't have to take responsibility. So before you can get people participating in DAOs in a culture like that, you've got to shift their entire culture to where they're responsible for their little area. Like, man, that's going to take a long time. So we've got our work cut out for ourselves. But it's a hard problem. It's not an impossible problem. So I have hope.
Excellent. And all power to you for taking on this challenge. Hopefully we'll all be reaping the benefits of all your hard work.
I hope so. Don't hold your breath, though. It's going to take a while.
Roy, in terms of Ethereum being one of the first platforms that was adopted at scale, do you think in the Web3 space we could find ourselves in a bit of a Microsoft situation where we use it just because everyone else is using it, not because it's the best option?
Really good question. Like Rob said, technologies are probably the most important thing that changes our society, right? Like when you look at how telegraph or the printing press or the rail system, and the thing that changed our society most is computers, like today. And the reason why my co-founder and I started Pellar is because blockchain is what we think will change the world, and in many regards it has. And there are many blockchains that came and went, and there are still many that's challenging the Ethereum as the default computation network. We don't really know which one's going to be here in 10, 20 years from now. But a lot of people are putting bets into Ethereum with their money, literally, and fake money, literally. So we're building on top of Ethereum purely because it has the largest network effect. And the more developers participate, the more tools that gets built, the more societies and DAO it creates on top of that ecosystem, the more powerful it will be. So I think it's going to be around for a very long time, but different to Microsoft, where it's a monolithic single control, where Ethereum is so decentralized. And a lot of that control and innovation and engineering comes from people, right? Trying to solve problems. So it is, but it is a little bit different.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rosh, so as a non-dev, there are a lot of us in this space and in this room who are working in this techie world and we're not devs. So you've started skilling up in that software development space. Can you just explain what sort of made that decision for you? You're obviously not trying to take over that role as a dev because you have devs that you work with, but why you've done that, and as a non-dev, what sort of educational tools or pathways you've used to upskill?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is something that's been sort of like a long narrative arc for me as well. I've sort of learned the skills that I needed to learn with the various different businesses that I've started or been a part of. And it's always been with a particular goal in mind. And I think that's, in this case, it's about really understanding the users who are going to be using this product, communicating with them, and also just breaking it down for your average person. I think one of the things which I like to do is a little bit of education, and I can't really convey, I guess, really properly a lot of the complexity that is happening in this space without fully understanding it myself. So plus it's also good to just get on the tools. Like I actually quite like that. I think that's been something that I've enjoyed over time. In terms of resources and all the rest of it, I think we're in this golden age, honestly, of information and educational resources. I think I used to I guess not fully subscribe to the idea that you needed to go somewhere and learn it, but learning the skill set with people who are 10 years younger than me, 20 years younger than me, who I'm working with, and have a totally different language, is really challenging, but also empowering. And so I've been learning a lot from different tutorials that you see online, watching YouTube videos, which sounds really silly as I say it, but honestly, it's the most relevant, and particularly in a new industry like this, it's where you're going to find all the information that is, I guess, most recent. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. Rob, for you. So you've got extensive experience in the tech space, and there are a lot of new players in the room here. I guess, what's a piece of advice that you would like to share about building on the blockchain, and based on your experience, something that people should have front of mind and be thinking about before they sort of step into the space or get too far down the road?
Well, for starters, to what Rosh was saying, I think that learning how to code is a little bit like the difference between reading the rules to a board game and playing the board game. And like you might have noticed, it's really hard to understand the game if you just read the rules. It's remarkable how much more clearly you can understand what a bit of software does if you just go and read the code. It's written in words, right? Code is just words. And the words actually kind of make sense even if you're not technical. So one of the first things that you want to do is get out of this mindset that I'm not technical. We're all technical. Nobody starts understanding this stuff. So go actually dig into the reads and the stuff that matters to what you're trying to build and understand it. You don't have to be able to build it yourself, but you want to be able to talk in meaningful terms with other people about what that thing is, and to be able to have real conversations with the people you're collaborating with about that. In terms of how do you get started in the space or building a blockchain business, the same way you build any kind of organization largely, no startup can grow faster than the founder's ability to grow themselves. That is the bottleneck. If you've built something to a certain scale before, you understand how to build it to that scale, and the learning starts once you go beyond that point usually. But up until that point, you are the bottleneck. And so you're essentially always having to learn how to do new hard things under pressure that matter. And every time you learn how to do that stuff, you have to learn some new things. You thought you knew how to bootstrap a company, now you need to figure out how to run the team. You thought you knew how to run the team, now you have to hire middle management. And then we can get into all of the board stuff. That one's a really fun one for the first time. Now you're having to talk to regulators. And before you know it, you're SBF and... Poor guy probably, remembers starting a business. Sorry, I shouldn't call him a poor guy, really.
Rich guy.
Yeah, probably. He probably thinks this is all a fever dream, and he's like 10 years ago whenever he started the business, and he's like, where am I now? So another really important thing, a bit of advice that I would like to give you all if you're going to try and tread the entrepreneurial route, which is really all of us increasingly, is mental health. I have never met a single founder in the entire world in my 25 years or so of doing startup stuff that does not struggle with mental health. There are those that admit it and those that don't, those that talk about it and those that don't. But responsibility is fucked. It's really hard. It's not hard work that is hard, it's being responsible for things. And so you have to face all of your fears when you build something. You find all of these irrational fears like, I I'm really terrified to do something that actually matters to me because, you know, if I don't care about it and it fails, that's fine. But if I care about it, then that's really scary to me. Whatever the fear is, you're going to find it. I want to over-perfect everything, you know, or I'm afraid that, you know, if I'm wrong, people are going to criticize me. We all have some. Well, guess what? Building a startup is going to put you face-to-face with those. So, you know, look after your mental health. Take breaks. Reconnect to your parasympathetic nervous system. Touch grass, as we say in the NFT community. You know, I think that if you approach these things with a beginner's mindset, with curiosity, take your time. It'll still be there tomorrow. Take the space. Surround yourself with other people who you have aligned values with, and be kind to your fellow humans. It is a much better strategy than any zero-sum game you can play in the long term. I lucked into it. I just treated everyone kindly and tried to do the right thing by them for a long time, and then eventually discovered it's actually just really effective, because then you have this whole network of people who will like you and will tell anyone that asks that you're great. That's a way better asset than, you know, you made that extra $2 million 7 years ago, but everyone hates you. Trust me.
Thanks, Rob. That's a great insight. So that wraps it up. Our time is up. So these three guys are an absolute wealth of knowledge. So hit them up in the break. They've got so much knowledge to impart on you all. So if you get an opportunity, grab them for a quick chat. Thanks, guys, for your time, and hope you enjoyed the session.
Thanks, Tiah.
And thank you, Tiah, for being a great help.